Is Steven Spielberg the greatest director of all time? He very well could be. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and welcome back to another video. Today I have a special ranking, as I am ranking all 35 Steven Spielberg directed films. This starts back in 1971 with Duel and goes all the way to his most recent film, Disclosure Day, which I have a review for, linked up above. Check it out if you're interested. I spent the last year and some change watching through his entire filmography. I'd seen a bunch of his movies, so I just rewatched those, but then there were a handful of his movies that I'd never seen that I checked out for the first time. I watched them in release order, again, from 1971 to 2026, and now I'm here to rank them all. This is my personal ranking of his movies. So if you're expecting some objective best list, that is not what this is. This is my 2 cents, my personal opinion, and if I wasn't giving you my honest thoughts, I feel like this video wouldn't be worthwhile. So just know, this is where I'm coming from, my personal experience, my taste when it comes to Steven Spielberg, and it's okay that you have your own. Share it in the comments down below, and of course, hit that like button, subscribe to that notification bell, and be on the lookout for more videos coming very soon. If you want to see my in-depth written reviews for all these movies along with star ratings, Letterboxd is the place to be. You can follow me over there at FilmSuck. But that's enough yapping on my part. The time has come to rank all of his movies from worst to best. In my personal opinion, he might just be my favorite director of all time. But let's go ahead and dive in to this ranking. And I don't know how long this video is going to be, but you've been warned it could get up there in runtime, okay? Just like some of Spielberg's movies. In dead last, at number 35, is going to be 1941. This movie came out in 1979. I gotta say, to me, it's a big fat nothing burger that's painfully unfunny. It's one of the few Spielberg films that's just a straight up comedy, and the comedy misses the mark for almost the entirety of the runtime. The only saving grace with this movie is John Belushi's shtick. Obviously, he's an SNL legend. He was in the Blues Brothers, Animal House. He has those comedic chops, but the movie at large is a dud, a misfire, comedically speaking. The jokes are dull, the characters are annoying, and it's flat out hard to watch at times. But the reason I comfortably have this in last place when compared to the rest of Spielberg's filmography is there's not one single moment or filmmaking aspect that screams Steven Spielberg. It was pretty early on in his career. It was before he really had his signature style. And with this being the movie to follow up Jaws and Close Encounters, I have every right to have it at the bottom. It is probably the worst film he's ever made. I know others would argue some that I have low tier here as well, but I think to me, it is his worst movie, least enjoyable, and the one that I see myself never going back to when I look at Steven Spielberg's filmography. At number 34, though, is going to be the BFG, or The Big Friendly Giant. This came out in 2016. It is based on the Roald Dahl book that I think we all probably read at some point in elementary school or middle school. I vaguely remember reading through it, and this was actually a first-time watch for me during my journey. I avoided this one, kind of dreaded having to check it out because I had heard bad things, and I had a feeling it wouldn't be my cup of tea, and that certainly was the case. Now, I will acknowledge Mark Rylance's motion capture performance as the Big Friendly Giant is the selling point of this movie. He carries it for sure as like the anchor of the film, delivers a strong performance. You pair that with a handful of mesmerizing VFX shots, notably like the collection of dreams the Big Friendly Giant has. For some shots, they're like pieces of art. I'm like, yeah, that's gorgeous. But those few bright spots can't save this movie from constantly being way too silly and flat out dumb. Much like with 1941, there are failed attempts at humor in this film that fall flat time and time again and kind of take you out of the movie. And I get it's based on a kid's book, so it makes sense that there's humor targeted to kids, but there are like fart jokes in this movie and big giants running around having just very silly, childish humor. And I get this is a family film, but for it to work, it has to really pull on those heartstrings and have those emotional beats that hit home. And I just felt this movie missed those. It was almost an empty watch to me because I was so taken out by the silliness of it all. Again, like with 1941, a lot of the signature Spielberg elements are lacking here, and this one's less forgivable because this is after a decades-long career, and this just doesn't have the Spielberg magic. It almost got to the point where I was thinking to myself at the end of the film, as the credits rolled, if this movie was directed by someone else and Spielberg's name didn't pop up, I wouldn't have been surprised. It's one of the least Spielberg movies out there, highly forgettable, and just dumb kind of throwaway nonsense. Next up on my list at number 33, we're already getting into some controversy, folks. Hot takes incoming. This is a divisive one. I have Ready Player One. This came out in 2018. I saw it in theaters, hadn't seen it since then, so I went back and rewatched it for this ranking. And I gotta say, in the year 2026, this movie just does not hold up for me. It comes off as just throwing every 80s reference in the world at your face and being like, look at us, we got the 80s references, the Easter eggs, the cameos, the needle drops. It's all 80s. 80s, right? It's almost 1980s overload to a certain point where that's the only focus of the movie is having these references to that decade. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some fun sequences here, especially the race scene, and the structure of the film with these characters trying to find the different keys lends itself to some neat moments, like the whole middle act that basically pays homage to The Shining as our characters are inserted into the Overlook Hotel and actual scenes from that movie. But the majority of Ready Player One plays out like one video game cutscene after another. Because it is such a VFX CGI heavy movie, that kind of strips it of the Spielberg traits, makes them harder to find. And I haven't read the book, I've heard it's a lot better than the movie. And I understand the intention of this film is to be a love letter to all things 80s, but I'm honestly left feeling empty because of how dull the characters are and how generic the story really is at the end of the day. But the major reason I have Ready Player One so low is this is a Spielberg ranking, okay? If Ready Player One was directed by any Joe Schmo or some random director, I'd probably be a lot more forgiving. But when I compare this to the rest of his filmography, I'm like, yeah, it's easily one of the lower tier movies. At number 32, I have Always. This movie released in 1989, stars Richard Dreyfuss and John Goodman. And I gotta say that up until the last 20 or so minutes, I thought this was gonna be a complete dud for Spielberg. And in all honesty, since I did watch this one about a year ago now, it hasn't aged well. It's very forgettable when I look at the rest of Spielberg's catalog. It does pull on the heartstrings in those final moments, and it's one of those films that makes you appreciate the small things in life, you know, on the day-to-day basis, and your friends or family that you might take for granted. Always make that phone call. You never know when you're going to see someone again or when the last time you're going to see someone will be. It's one of those movies that touches on those themes, so I can appreciate that. But the route this story takes kind of creates an emotional disconnect. Because of the situation the main character's in, it's really hard to care or feel too invested, as most scenes play out so awkwardly. I don't want to say too much for those of you who haven't seen, but I kind of got to, so mild spoilers for Always. The main character of the movie is dead for most of the time, and so he's just following around characters almost as like an angel. So Richard Dreyfuss is watching a bunch of these characters he used to know interact with one another, and it just felt weird. Off-putting, one could say. A lot of these scenes are just bland. The movie meanders far too much for my liking. Credit to John Goodman, he shines when he's on screen. He always carries in those supporting roles, but at the end of the day, easily one of the weaker Spielberg movies, and one that I don't see myself ever really going back to. At number 31, I've got The Lost World Jurassic Park, aka Jurassic Park 2, the sequel that's not as good as Jurassic Park, as in fact, none of the sequels after Jurassic Park ever come close to sniffing the greatness of that original masterpiece.
That is one big pile of shit.
But the highlights of Lost World, there's a couple. One, Jeff Goldblum is Ian Malcolm. He carries the movie. I wish we had the entire trio from the first film back. That's obviously not the case. But you get more of Jeff Goldblum doing his thing with his little quips, his stuttering. I'm not opposed to that, okay? He's awesome in this movie. And we do have like the RV or bus sequence with the T-Rex. Highly riveting stuff. That is the closest thing we kind of get to the Jeep sequence from the original Jurassic Park. It's raining, there's a cliff, you got the T-Rex involved. Like, that will make your palms sweat. So there are dino moments to like here, but I personally have never been a huge fan of the direction the film goes in the third act, where we see this T-Rex running wild. Kind of takes me out of the movie a little bit, and I feel like a lot of it is just rehashing the first Jurassic, trying to reheat those leftovers, and it never really reaches the highs of Jurassic Park. Again, I hate to say it, but Dr. Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler's presence are missing here. Even though there are those tension-filled moments, like I said, this movie just fails to reach the heights of Jurassic Park and kind of lives in that movie's shadow. Now again, it's far from the worst of the Jurassic series. There are some genuine stinkers that follow Jurassic Park, but at the end of the day, it's just kind of whatever. And when you look at, again, Spielberg's filmography, it's always been lower for me. Now, at number 30 is a controversial one. This is a movie that I didn't vibe with that much. I understand and respect the filmmaking. I also just found out that a lot of people adore this one when I hadn't heard any praise for it until Film Twitter recently. So brace yourselves, just my opinion. It is AI, artificial intelligence. I respect the craftsmanship here. Any Spielberg film is going to look beautiful from a technical standpoint. It's going to shine. And Haley Joel Osment is incredible here. I mean, he's very intentionally robotic. He's playing a robot in the film. But like I said, there's clearly a master at work behind the camera. It's well shot on a technical level. There's gorgeous frame after gorgeous frame. But for me, and this is just my opinion, of course, I struggled to really emotionally connect as hard as I would have hoped with this movie. So there is a bit of a disconnect, especially as we reach the middle of the film and onward. It begins to drag and drag. And it's come to my attention that Stanley Kubrick was initially going to make this film and then Spielberg took over. And that kind of checks out for me. I've I've never been a huge Kubrick fan. I've always been hesitant to check out a lot of his filmography just because, companions, friends of mine have told me, I know this might not be your jam. I've seen The Shining. A lot of his other big ones I haven't seen intentionally just because I'm hesitant. And so I think there are very much hints of Kubrick here, and that's why it's not fully up my alley. There are some serious pacing issues that kind of just result in a drag to the finish line, and it doesn't help that structurally there are enough ideas to fill out multiple movies here, but they're all kind of jammed into one overlong final product. I'm glad I checked this off the list. I see the appeal. It's just never been my cup of tea. I know people adore this one. I can't say I'm there. It's not like I'm eager to revisit this, but the movie, again, has its highlight moments. Haley Joel Osment's performance being the one I can praise the most, and Teddy is the GOAT. Teddy was the man. It's just a more contemplative sci-fi drama, not fully my jam when compared again to Spielberg's filmography, and this is all my opinion at the end of the day, so please let me know what you think of AI down below. At number 29, I have Lincoln. This is a movie that I actually struggled to get through when it first came out. I was a lot younger back then, but I only watched 30 or 40 minutes and turned it off. Well, I revisited it all these years later. I made it, and of course, it goes without saying, Daniel Day-Lewis won an Oscar for his performance as Abraham Lincoln. He's picture perfect. He brought the man to life with the mannerisms, with the look, with the voice, all of it. He was Abraham Lincoln, a well-deserved Oscar win for sure, and he carries the entire movie. You're like, yeah, I'm watching an actual historical figure. That is the 16th president come to life on my screen. And if you told me that's actually him reincarnated, I'd be like, yeah, I buy that. I mean, he really nailed the role. I was also blown away by how every other scene an award-winning actor would show up. Like Tommy Lee Jones has a huge role in this movie, Sally Field. Then you got Walton Goggins. The list goes on with just random famous actors showing up. James Spader. I was like, holy hell, every scene, an award winner, an award nominee would just pop up. I'd be like, damn, how stacked is this cast? And it goes without saying, it's a Spielberg film. It's incredibly well shot. Almost every frame is like a work of art. However, the film that surrounds this Daniel Day-Lewis performance can be a complete drag to sit through. And what I'm about to say is coming from someone who loved history. It's my favorite subject growing up. I just could not get emotionally invested in this story because the subject material was kind of a bore to sit through. Borderline a snooze fest of a movie. I'll come right out and say it. The dialogue lacked that pop, pizzazz, or really any engaging qualities. I equate watching this movie to reading a history textbook. There's valuable information. It's just kind of a chore to soak it all in. All that to say, the third act won me over with a big vote sequence. Daniel Day-Lewis, Oscar-winning performance, rightfully so. But at the end of the day, for me, Lincoln is a pretty tedious watch. At number 28 on my list, I've got The Terminal. This released in 2004, and I had not seen it until I watched it here. Tom Hanks is the main character of the film. Unsurprisingly, delivers another superb performance. He's doing this Eastern European accent, very different route for him. Also, when I'm looking at Spielberg's entire filmography, this is more of a comedy with rom-com vibes, I'll say. It was very different for him, and I respect that he's so versatile, right? Because we're used to him doing sci-fi, adventure. This is borderline a straight-up rom-com with dramedy elements, and I was impressed. The Terminal also is a one-location movie. It takes place entirely inside of an airport, so if you're a fan of one-location movies, this is probably your thing. It definitely adds to the immersion because you familiarize yourself with these locations, and it kind of creates this tension. I think of some of the great one-location films, like, say, a 12 Angry Men, or Reservoir Dogs. This is not on par with those movies, but the one-location gimmick does work here. And when I look at the rest of Spielberg's filmography, this entry is definitely a bit off the beaten path. Because of that, it does make for one of the strangest viewing experiences for a film directed by the man. But there are some clashing tones here. Like, within the first 10-15 minutes, there's this devastating moment. Then later on, Tom Hanks' character is running around the airport, hopping on a construction crew and making these cracker sandwiches with ketchup. It's a bit strange. It's just a weird movie. There's no getting around it. That's how I describe it. It's totally serviceable, but it's kind of in the mid to tier for Spielberg just because this man can deliver greatness, and this is more of an average movie than you'd expect for him to make, at least. Tom Hanks' performance is awesome. There are some supporting actors here that shocked me, like young Diego Luna, young Zoe Saldana, Chi McBride appears. I was like, dang, they got a pretty solid cast of young guns before they glowed up and became who they are today. But I will say my big takeaway with The Terminal is I don't think I'll ever complain about a delay at the airport again because it could be much, much worse. At number 27, I have The Adventures of Tintin. This came out in 2011. Spielberg had 2 movies this year, but this is fascinating because it actually marks Spielberg's first animated feature film. Right off the bat, it's filled with swashbuckling adventure. I can see Spielberg directed this because it has those hints of Indiana Jones. There's even some extravagant, well-animated chase sequences through the hills that are impressive. There's this scene where the 2 main characters are in a plane over the desert through a storm. There are just really interesting set pieces that are so well animated. The motion capture technology, kind of hit or miss for me, I will say, and at times I'm wowed by it, other times I'm kind of disturbed by how characters look. Stylistically, the transitions, out of control in the best possible way. Maybe the most unique transitions I've seen in any Spielberg film, and he's got some awesome ones, but in this movie, he ate. Now, I do wish I felt a bit of a deeper connection to the leads of the film, and honestly, this is a movie that could grow on me over time. I've only seen it once, and that can be said about a good chunk of these movies. Over time, maybe I have a better experience with Tintin, but it had potential to be on the level of an Indiana Jones. Maybe the animation was the barrier for me to fully lock in with this one, because I was entertained by the journey, but it does move at like 100 miles an hour out the gate, which never allows for those emotional moments to fully sink in. So for Spielberg's first animated film, it works. It's just one of those movies that when I look at the rest of the man's filmography, falls a little flat, and maybe that is the disconnect with the animation style, who's to say, but I really enjoyed the adventure at the end of the day. At number 26, I have the Sugarland Express. This is Spielberg's second feature film, and I asked the question, is he the king of chase movies and chase sequences? Because this is basically just one long chase movie. This is another solid directorial effort from the man. It's his first theatrically released feature, actually, because Duel was a TV movie. And I'm just impressed with how much detail he's able to pack into every little frame. There's one shot in particular that utilizes rearview mirrors in a car. I'm always blown away by Spielberg's shot composition. The man knows how to frame a scene. Now, this is a pretty simple story. It doesn't really do anything new. It's solid, especially impressive for it being his second ever feature film. When I look back, I'm like, that's pretty impressive that he was able to pull that off early on in his career. But in terms of memorable moments, quotes, characters, it does fall a little lower for me, unfortunately. Some of the characters in the movie are just flat out annoying, and that's never helpful. So yeah, Sugarland Express is a fine watch. I will say, pretty wild this is based on true events, though. At number 25 on my list, I have the newly released Disclosure Day. That's right, the 35th film he's ever made. I have my review, again, linked up above earlier in this video and available in the description. Disclosure Day is kind of a mixed bag for me. I still really don't know how I fully feel. It's a movie that is so well shot, and again, you're gonna hear that a lot more in this. If it's a Spielberg movie, it's going to be damn good looking. That's the case here. I really was riveted by a few select sequences that had the classic Spielberg charm and magic. One in particular is a chase sequence where a car like drives through this field, and then there's a train moment, riveting stuff as well. The movie does ask some really interesting questions. It poses the question, what would the world's reaction be if extraterrestrial life was revealed to be real and being hidden from us? What would happen if that's let out? It makes you fall down the rabbit hole of like, what would happen to organized religion? People doubting their faith, would that crumble? What would happen? And so on paper, really fascinating concepts. In execution, kind of falters because of the script not having as much meat on the bone as you would hope. The characters are a bit dull and shallow, so it makes it hard to fully lock in. And as the movie progresses, kind of loses steam because it takes so long to get to a point that the audience already knows and has already made very clear early on. And so at 2.5 hours nearly, it's a drag to endure by the time the credits roll. So I'm very mixed. It's well shot. Emily Blunt's performance is Oscar-worthy, and John Williams' score feels like some of the early days, the Close Encounters, the ETs, but the movie as a whole doesn't have that adventure, doesn't pack the punch I would have hoped for a Spielberg alien movie. And so I'm left kind of going, what could have been? It's moderately disappointing. I respect the craftsmanship in the filmmaking, but it's not one of my favorites from him, and I feel like it might not age that well either, unfortunately. At number 24, I've got War of the Worlds. This released in 2005, and of course is based on the iconic story War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds is frustrating for me because I think the first 2 acts are truly great. And if it stuck the landing, it could be top 15 Spielberg. Tom Cruise, we get a few different running moments from him, and anytime he's in a movie, you want to see him sprinting, you're going to get that here. But I'm just blown away by how well shot the movie is, and I'm not going to shut up about it. During like the first 20 minutes, the arrival of the aliens happens, and we see this scene of Tom Cruise sprinting around while pure chaos and destruction ensues around him, and it just gives me chills. The iconic shot from this movie, of course, is when we see the video camera fall to the ground and we see the alien through the screen of the video recorder. Chills. We also have the practical moment where Tom Cruise's character walks out of the house into this destroyed hull of an airplane with all this junk spread out throughout the yard. Practical filmmaking at its best, ladies and gentlemen. My issue is the movie really loses steam about halfway to 2/3 of the way through and has a lackluster ending. Semi-rushed, the reasoning behind why these aliens disappear is just kind of cheesy to me, and I know they're basing it off the source source material, so that's kind of out of their control. They wanted to stay true to that, but it just always lost me. I check out a little bit. Once Tim Robbins' character arrives and they're in like the basement of that old house, that's where the movie really loses steam for me. But it starts out freaking strong. If this movie had the quality of the first act for all three, it would be in the conversation for top 15. And my thing is, the fear of what you can't see is always scarier than whatever alien or monster design a movie cooks up. So once the aliens like get off their little transports or ships or whatever and they're walking around, it takes me out of the movie ever so slightly. Pair that with the rush, sort of anticlimactic finale, and it ends on a whimper, sadly. At number 23 on my list, I've got Amistad, which came out in 1997, same year as Jurassic Park 2 or The Lost World. And this is one of Spielberg's historical dramas that's like 2.5 hours, touches on some really heavy subject material revolving around slavery. It's not to be taken lightly at all. There are certain flashbacks that contain imagery that I really never need to witness again. This is definitely one of those movies that's like a one watch in my lifetime and I'm good kind of thing. There's no rewatch value at all, simply because the movie can be emotionally draining. That being said, this is a historical period piece that's very well made. It does play out as a courtroom drama for a good 2/3 of the movie, and that was compelling. Seeing Matthew McConaughey go in full lawyer mode, I was locked in. Jaimin Hansu's performance, very good stuff, maybe his best work, arguably. And the movie has the perfect hook as we see the slaves revolt on this ship. It's gritty, dark, but sets the tone for what the movie's all about. Anthony Hopkins' performance and role, which is predominantly featured in the third act of the movie, is strong. The man delivers like what feels like a 5 or 10 minute monologue where he's just literally talking the entire time, like he's one of the greats for a reason. I feel like the movie had a natural resolution and then went on 20 to 40 minutes too long after that, so it lost some steam, but if I'm being honest, it left me with a lot to ponder. It was an effective watch. Spielberg delivered on what he was going for, and so it's a solid movie. Again, not one of my like favorites, because I think there are just better movies, but I feel like this is one of the forgotten Spielbergs, especially from the 90s. At number 22, I have War Horse, the other Spielberg film from the year 2011. This is a movie that I first watched in world history class back in 2015-ish. I didn't care for the movie back then. Granted, it was split up over like 4 days because class periods were 50 minutes and the movie is kind of on the long side. So I had to watch it at first period. So it was at like 7 in the morning. I was watching this movie for 3 or 4 days in a row. I wasn't the most enthusiastic about it, but having gone back and revisited about 11 years later, I have a whole new appreciation for War Horse, okay? I was wrong about this one. It's actually a pretty well-made, solid war movie that's compelling. This is a tale of perseverance, determination, and the overall goodness that can be found naturally in humans. Maybe the standout scene in the movie is where the main horse, Joey, is stuck in no man's land, and from the trenches, an English soldier and a German soldier meet in the middle, and they put aside their differences. They're enemies, but for that moment, they're just humans, and it showed deep down how there is this empathy and goodness inside of everyone. It was very powerful stuff, in my opinion, and one of the highlights of the film. Like, there's this universal, natural connection between people. It's powerful stuff to witness, even in the darkest of times, right? We're in World War I, we can still come together and perform this act of goodness, saving this horse. I also have to tip my hat to how gorgeous some of the landscapes are here. Shooting on location for the win. There's so many picturesque shots with these gorgeous landscapes shot on location, with sunsets, with natural weather on display. I mean, just works of art this movie possesses, guys. Those cinematic wide shots are a Spielberg staple he delivered here. Now, when it comes to War Horse, there are so many characters coming and going. We're following this horse, and it can get a little choppy at times because, oh, we're following this group of English, soldiers. Bam, we're with some German kids. Boom, we're with this granddaughter and grandfather. Bang, we're with this guy who's overseeing the horses. Now we're back with the main character. It just kind of was all over the place with the characters, so it was hard to latch onto any humans. And I get that's intentional to show the trials and tribulations of this main horse, Joey. And that goes to show the scary nature of war, right? The goal is to really show how uncertain life is for this horse. But because of that, and because of the constant coming and going of characters, certain parts of this film are just significantly more engaging than others, because some of those characters are duds, some of them you're really emotionally moved by. So that's just the game you play when you got this rotating group of characters involved. But at the end of the day, War Horse did its job. I had a turnaround on this movie. We all have those movies that we thought we felt one way on, then like a decade passes by, we watch it again and we feel a whole nother type of way. That's War Horse for me. So I can confidently say I was moved by War Horse's pure intentions and display of the indomitable human and horse spirit. At number 21, I've got Empire of the Sun. This came out in 1987 and features a young Christian Bale in the lead role. He delivers an all-time child actor performance. I mean, it's no surprise surprised after watching this that he went on to become one of the modern day greats. He's won an Oscar. I think he'll probably get another in his time. I mean, he is just pure talent on screen. Early on in the movie, there's an invasion scene where the main character Jim gets separated from the rest of his parents, and it was just anxiety inducing to the max. We've all been kids, right? Probably gone to the grocery store, got separated from our mom. She's like on an aisle or two over, and you just feel anxious in that moment. Imagine that times a million. You get separated from your family. You're going on this quest to try and find them. You end up in this camp. Like, it's tragic stuff. My con with a lot of Spielberg movies is the same, though. I feel like this one can get too drawn out. It's almost like Spielberg has a requirement for some of his movies to be almost 2.5 hours. That's not necessary. You could certainly trim some of the fat here, like with many of the other movies I've already talked about on this list. Ultimately, it lands the plane at the end, but it does feel like it's stuck in the mud for a lot of the middle part. But the movie's effective with what it's going for, just like with Amistad. Empire of the Sun delivers an emotionally impactful glimpse into the horrors of war, and frankly, the aftermath that follows war. But what puts this above some of the other films is it shows war through the lens of a child. And we see this young boy lose his innocence throughout the film as he's exposed to these horrors at the hands of humanity. He can see the worst of men. So at the end of the day, Empire of the Sun's a coming-of-age story following Jim's journey, and it's pretty profound stuff. At number 20, I have the first ever Spielberg film, Duel. This came out in 1971. It was a released for TV movie, and let me just tell you, you would never in a million years be able to tell this didn't have a theatrical release initially, because this plays out like something that was made for the big screen, folks. It's filled with high-octane chase sequences that just have you on edge. I think it's funny that Spielberg's first two movies are all about chases, and then we saw that influence in Raiders and plenty of other recent films, even Disclosure Day from this year. It's like a quick 90-minute thriller. It never lets the audience take a breath. I do wish there was more depth to the main character, David, as this could have made for an even more compelling watch. It's a very solid directorial debut. If you have road rage or experience anyone with road rage, this movie might get to you. Still blows my mind that's his first feature film. I know he made some smaller things that you can't really find or watch anywhere. This has kind of always been marketed as his first movie, and it's a really strong debut. At number 19, let the controversy really begin. I don't care. It's my personal feelings. I've got Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This is very clearly Spielberg's most overhated movie. This is the first Indiana Jones movie I saw in theaters. 2008 that was. I was a young lad back then, and so I have a lot of nostalgia for it, but I've watched it 4 or 5 times as like a fully grown adult, and I've experienced it in different phases of my life over the past 3 or 4 years, and it still really holds up to me. I know there are gripes with this film. Often cited, the CGI gophers, Indiana Jones surviving a nuclear explosion in a lead-lined fridge, and Mutt Williams swinging on vines with monkeys. All of those things add up to maybe 3 or 4 minutes of the entire runtime. At its core, we get another really well-directed Indiana Jones adventure. It's Indy at a later stage in life, but he's not geriatric yet. He's an older Indy, but he's still got the moves. We get to see him have a son in Mutt Williams, and that reveal is really well handled when Marion returns to the picture about halfway through. And we do get some classic physical Indiana Jones set pieces. Like there's a moment where him and Mutt find the crystal skull and they're crawling around in like the tomb. Very classic Indiana Jones. I think the opening is riveting. There are plenty of callbacks. The action sequences are a straight up thrill. There's a sense of classic adventure through and through. And Spielberg went hard with framing and shot composition. Like the moment when we first see Indiana Jones in this film, incredibly well shot, especially if you watch the behind the scenes of it. He cooked. But a big issue people have with this film that's become a knock on Crystal Skull is the fact that it involves aliens. And watching this within the context of Spielberg's filmography makes me push back on that notion, as it makes complete sense for him to tackle aliens in Indiana Jones, as he's directed Close Encounters, E.T., Artificial Intelligence, War of the Worlds, and now Disclosure Day. It's safe to say the man has a freaking passion for the extraterrestrial, alright? E.T. Like logically, whether you believe or not, it does make sense that Indiana Jones would get intertwined in some archaeological plotline that culminates with aliens. You got the Wrath of God at the end of the first movie. You have the thuggy cult in Temple of Doom. Last Crusade, you've got the cup that Christ drank from. Now you got aliens. Dial of Destiny, time travel, that's taking it too far. But aliens, I mean, that's a lot more believable in my opinion. Then you got the Russians, who were essentially a stand-in for the Nazis in the first and third films. And all the staples of a vintage Indiana Jones adventure are here. It's not as good as the first 3 indie movies, I will admit that, but this still has Spielberg behind the camera. There is some magic, the John Williams score, incredible stuff. He delivers yet again, and I just have a blast when I go and watch this movie. It's flawed, but I would watch it over every movie I just listed. That's why I have it as high as I do. It's still got 18 movies above it, by the way. So it's not like it's top 10 Spielberg or anything. But I've just always been a huge defender of this movie. I think a lot of people are quick to dismiss it, but I just don't understand the utter vitriol against this movie. It's a fun Indiana Jones adventure that has heart, meaningful moments, and has a pretty high rewatch value. I've always thought it's gotten the short end of the stick, unfairly so. At number 18 on my list is going to be The Color Purple, which came out in 1985, and this really marks the beginning of Spielberg taking on these epic period pieces. I've never read the classic novel the film is based on, but man, can I admire the storytelling here. Much like Amistad, this is a powerful tale that doesn't have a lot of rewatch value because some of the subject material is heavy. Like, genuinely, it's just hard to watch at times. It portrays this darkness in humanity, and the character of Celie is just dealt such a terrible hand in life. But it's inspiring how she perseveres in this tale that ends up being filled with hope by the end. I will say Danny Glover's portrayal of Mr. Albert, downright despicable stuff. Like, one of those characters who's just so easy to hate. So yeah, The Color Purple, like a lot of Spielberg's historical drama films, a bit long-winded, one could say, but I think in the end, it delivered an inspiring story about overcoming adversity, never giving up, no matter how grim things might get. At number 17 on my list, I've got Bridge of Spies, which came out in 2015. Mark Rylance won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. I'm still salty about that. Sorry, I've now seen the movie. I can say Stallone should have easily beat him for his performance in Creed. That's neither here nor there. Bridge of Spies was proof that Spielberg still had his fastball in the 2010s. Very strong entry here. Tom Hanks, Mr. Consistent, you could call him in the acting business because he's never going to miss. But at its core, this movie's a compelling Cold War drama that explores just a fascinating true story of espionage. More importantly, though, all the government negotiations going on behind the scenes with these spies. There are some visual parallels from the first to third act that give me chills. It was just Spielberg in his bag. And overall, I thought this was an intriguing glimpse into that Cold War era of high tension between the US and the Soviets. Just a very solid, well-paced, thrilling watch from Spielberg that I feel like might go under the radar, honestly. Just above that at number 16, I have The Post. This is a movie that I avoided because it came out when I was in high school and I wasn't the most interested at the time, but now that I've seen it, this is right up my alley. It proved that Spielberg can really do it all, as it's a straight-up journalism-based political thriller. Tom Hanks back at it again, Mr. Consistent. Meryl Streep, the real lead of this film, was nominated for an Oscar, yet again, and deservedly so, I would say. This is probably the most surprising film during my Spielberg journey because I had little to no expectations, and it ended up being my cup of tea. But the final hour of this movie in particular was genuinely riveting. Like, the stakes were real, and the tension was off the charts as there was this race to publish the truth. Will they publish? Won't they publish? What will the legal ramifications be if they do publish? Jesse Plemons' character, very solid supporting role here. He only has a few minutes, but his presence elevated every single scene he was in. Bob Odenkirk, electric performance here. And this movie just gives us a realistic glimpse at how the press operates when they're going up against the government. It was a treat to watch. Unsurprisingly, John Williams is the composer of this film, and his music elevates every single Spielberg film, especially like the final 30 minutes here. My only minor gripe is that after the opening sequence, the pacing kind of screeches to a halt for 20 or so minutes, and then I was fully locked in for the remainder of the film. Ends up being a strong 4 out of 5 for me. One of my fave Spielbergs of the 2010s. It was a movie that was just right up my alley. It's dismissed just like Bridge of Spies, but those two in the 2010s were proof that Spielberg still got it. He still got the fastball, and I feel like this and Bridge of Spies are some of the slept-on Steven Spielberg movies. Bringing us into the top 15 is going to be Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Fun fact, this is technically a prequel. It takes place a year before the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I feel like a lot of people don't know that. Indiana Jones is my favorite movie character of all time. If you haven't picked up on that by now, we're going to talk about him later on. I have a ranking of all the movies from 2023 linked up above. Temple of Doom, without a doubt, is the darkest entry in the Indiana Jones saga, if you want to call it that. Spielberg's even on record saying he was kind of in a dark place making this movie, and so that's why it's so freaking dark. It's the Indiana Jones movie I actually didn't watch at a young age. I was a little older when I watched it for the first time because I had a feeling it would freak me out. Ended up being fine, but I'd always heard murmurs of Mola Ram ripping out a man's heart and it lighting on fire. That freaked me out just based on description, so I did avoid this movie. And yeah, it is a dark watch. It's my least favorite of the first 3 indies, and I think the least rewatchable of the first 3. But that final act rules. You got the minecart chase, the bridge showdown. Prepare to meet Kali in hell. I love that line.
Prepare to meet Kali in hell.
And I'm even a sucker for like the Club Obi-Wan opening when he's wearing the white jacket. and he gets poisoned trying to get the antidote. Short Round is one of my favorite sidekicks in indie, but just in movies in general. Dr. Jones, Dr. Jones! Come on now. That's Oscar winner Ke Huy Quan, mind you. But what holds Temple of Doom back outside of the darker tone, which I don't mind, is the silliness with the character of Willie being kind of insufferable for a lot of this movie, and just some of the stuff at Pankot Palace where they're almost like trying to intentionally gross us out with like the eyeball soup and the bugs being eaten. That's just a bit strange for me and kind of not my favorite. It's not on the same level as the first or third indie, but it is still operating a very high level with Spielberg behind the camera, with it being the darkest Indiana Jones adventure. At number 14, I've got Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I've only seen this once. It could certainly rise after time, but I gotta say Spielberg went for it here. This is an ambitious UFO sci-fi flick. I was in awe of the visual effects, especially with the context that this did come out in the 70s, the same year as the original Star Wars. We were just eating good back then, I guess, and somehow VFX have regressed. John Williams cooked with the score as always here. And the first half of the movie is not the most intriguing. The second half onward is really what elevated Close Encounters for me personally. I totally understand why this is a classic. It's by no means my favorite Spielberg. Again, I've only seen it the once. I want to watch it a couple more times throughout the course of my life, and I plan to. But it's one of those movies that, like, by the time the credits roll, you're sitting there going, I don't know how I fully feel. There's some conflicting emotions. It's one that I do need to watch again to really solidify my feelings on. But again, like I say, with most of these movies, the craftsmanship is on another level, and for this being one of his first films, it's Jaws in 75, this in 77, you just have to tip your hat to the man. He was operating at another level at a young stage in his career. At number 13 on my list, I've got Minority Report, another Tom Cruise, Steven Spielberg collab. I hope we get another one because I need it. But honestly, I was locked in from the jump with this movie. This is one I was excited to check out. Ended up being one of my favorite first-time watches in this journey. It's a sci-fi crime thriller. Tom Cruise and Colin Farrell are butting heads for a lot of this movie. It's filled with this mystery, these conspiracies. I was very interested in the story presented here. Highly original filmmaking as well with the plot. And there are plenty of clever reveals along the way that really just kept me on my toes. And if you look back too, we get fed with signature Spielberg shot after signature Spielberg shot. And as with any Tom Cruise film, we get plenty of Tom Cruise runs as well. I really enjoyed this one. It's a strong 8 out of 10, 4 out of 5 for me. Bordering top 10 Spielberg, and honestly a movie that I see myself going back to plenty of times over the next 10, 15 years. At number 12 on the list, I've got Hook. Just a magical experience of a movie. It perfectly bottles up the feeling of childlike wonder and nostalgia. Spielberg just delivers a heartwarming, family fun adventure, but it's Robin Williams' performance that's really the core of the film. He captures the joyful nature of Peter Pan, who's now an adult, so brilliantly, and just the world created here, filled with whimsy. How could you not watch this and walk out with a sense of childlike joy in your life again? And also, I didn't grow up in this movie. There's no nostalgia here. I watched it for the first time as a 22-year-old man a few years ago. It's just such a moving piece of storytelling about childhood and never wanting to grow up, always holding that childlike love and feeling in your heart. It makes you want to live life to the fullest. Adventures out there, and the quote at the end of the film never fails to make me tear up. To live would be an awfully big adventure. At number 11 on my list, I've got The Fabelmans from 2022. I missed this a few years ago. Shame on me. I'm glad I finally seen it. It's near a top 10 Spielberg film for me, and one that really resonates emotionally for me. It's a deeply personal, moving tale about a young boy who longs to be a filmmaker and chase his dreams, but the film serves as a reminder to always pursue what you believe in and never let others bring you down. Do not follow the societal set of expectations for your life. You gotta carve your own path. Never lose faith if you believe in yourself. Like, no matter how scary or overwhelming that sounds, we all control our own path at the end of the day. What shocked me the most is that this movie clocks in at 2.5 hours. I was locked in. It felt like it was an hour 45 or 2 hours. It's one of those sort of slice of life type films where you're just following a young boy coming of age, and you're so entranced by the storytelling, the filmmaking, the gorgeous shot after gorgeous shot. I mean, time and time again, I'm blown away by how Steven Spielberg maintains such a high level of filmmaking. It's astonishing, really. You can just tell this is a passion project for Spielberg, as it's loosely based on his own life experience as well. So watching The Fabelmans in turn makes you appreciate every other movie or piece of art he's ever put out. I just gotta say, The Fabelmans hit me. it resonated with me. The coming-of-age story is just a beautiful reminder to live life to the fullest and never back down from your dreams. I gotta say, Gabriel LaBelle, every time I see him in something, I'm like, that guy's gonna be a star. Saturday Night and this are the two films I've seen him in where he's a lead, and I'm like, give him all the roles. I wish him the best in his career. He's the man. But this quote at the end of the film kind of sums it up wonderfully. You do what your heart says you have to, because you don't owe anyone your life. But now we're getting into the top 10 Steven Spielberg films. In my personal opinion, of course, hit that like button, comment your top 10, your entire ranking down below if you want to get crazy. And while you're at it, throw a hashtag Steven Spielberg down there to let me know you've been watching the whole video. But coming in at number 10 for me is going to be Munich from 2005. This is a Best Picture nominee, and it's a film, much like all of his historical dramas, that tackles some pretty heavy subject material. It highlights the cyclical nature of violence and bloodshed, especially when driven by revenge. There's no winner. There's no peace ever, and there's no end. It taps into how messy conflicts between nations or groups of people can be, politically speaking especially, and how never-ending they can feel as well. Like, it just results in tragedy. I was also fascinated by how this movie portrays the extent to which some people will go for their country, even while they're unraveling into a state of pure paranoia, and it just acts as a great display of how far vengeance can really drive folks. At the end of the day, this is just another masterclass in directing from Spielberg. I watched some of the behind-the-scenes making of on YouTube, and just seeing his mind at work with this film, it's just impressive. The final shot of the film leaves you with a lot to ponder, especially again about this cyclical nature of violence. Will it ever end? Munich as a whole is this political thriller that really balances these tense sequences with heavy-hitting emotional scenes. I feel like Munich's another one of those underrated Spielberg films. At number 9 on my list is Best Picture winner Schindler's List. This is the hardest movie to watch when it comes to Steven Spielberg. I don't mean that as a bad thing. It is nearly 4 hours, it feels like, and it is a movie that will rip your heart out and just show you the nastiest, ugliest parts of humanity. It's also Spielberg's true passion project, as it's an extremely personal film for him, and that shows with how emotionally gut-wrenching that final product is. The score by John Williams is hauntingly beautiful and almost acts as its own character throughout the film to guide the audience through. Ralph Fiennes has this terrifying turn as Eamon Goth in the concentration camps, just a sick, sick individual. But at the end of the day, this is an achievement in filmmaking because it shows the tragic events of the Holocaust on film in a way that might never be captured again for audiences. I am of the opinion Schindler's List should be a required viewing for everyone because it's a very important history lesson. Spielberg shines a light on a horrible atrocity that will leave you depressed and contemplating how this could have ever happened. How could horrors like this ever take place in our world? It also serves as a reminder to say, hey, this is history. Let it never repeat itself. That's why I think everyone should check this movie out because of how impactful it is. We need a reminder of the past so that we don't repeat it. I think Schindler's List should be almost required viewing for everyone at some point in their life. It's not rewatchable. It's not, a Spielberg movie you're going to toss on and have a good time with, but it is such a well-made film that is important that you need to watch this thing, okay? Liam Neeson's performance in the final scene gives me full-body chills, and the quote I'll pull to end is, "Whoever saves one life saves the world entire." On a bit more of a lighthearted note, at number 8, I've got Catch Me If You Can, a blast of a Spielberg film. Like with Warhorse, I actually watched this for the first time in high school as well, in my forensic science class senior year. It was kind of an excuse for the teacher to just do nothing, but I wasn't complaining. You basically, for about 2 hours and 20 minutes, you get a cat and mouse game between Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. Sign me up. Leo's great at playing cool characters who can manipulate their way through situations with smooth talking and good looks. That's exactly what you get here with Frank Abagnale Jr. This is one of the most purely entertaining Spielberg movies, just straight up. Walken was nominated for supporting actor, which shocks me, but he has one scene in particular that shines at the dinner table. I just like stories of seeing how far someone can go. How much can they get away with before they're ultimately caught? The FBI versus one man. There's undercover aliases, location changes. It's just such a suave, almost stylistic Spielberg movie that it's got to be in the top 10 for me. At number 7 is West Side Story from 2021. This is arguably the definitive musical movie of our lifetime. You could argue the first Wicked, sure, but this movie is special. I think the original West Side Story from 1961, the Best Picture winner, is a true classic. It has taken me about 4 or 5 years to realize this is even better than the original. And it's a movie that's only grown on me over time. I enjoyed it quite a bit when I first saw it, but each subsequent viewing, I've appreciated the movie more and more to the point where it is rated 5 out of 5 for me. It's a tale as old as time, of course, following that Romeo and Juliet template, but from the opening sequence, it's just so effortlessly engrossing. The performances are unreal. The elegant dance choreography blows my mind. Like, everyone brought it physically with their performances. The musical numbers are just show-stopping. I listen to the soundtrack in my car frequently, but song after song plays a really important role in just the emotional stakes of the film and serves a purpose in advancing the story, but it also just has really well-written, classic, timeless music. The crane shots are just out of control. I'm sure you've seen that one scene that circulates on social media every few weeks of characters walking into the gym. The way that is just framed is master filmmaking by Spielberg. The costumes are so elaborate with details galore. The gorgeous lighting is present with signature Spielberg cinematic lighting everywhere. Everything just comes together so well to create what I gotta describe as a modern musical masterpiece. What an achievement for movie musicals, but also what an achievement for Spielberg to pull this off so late in his career. I have 6 movies left, and I'm starting to lose my voice, by the way, so if I sound different, it's because I've been yapping. At number 6 on my list, I've got Saving Private Ryan. To me, this is the greatest war film of all time, as it throws the audiences into the trenches with the opening sequence as soldiers are storming the beaches of Normandy. It paints a realistic picture of the atrocities, the horrors of war, how violent war can be, and the toll it takes on individuals. But that opening is the real deal. That's what's been talked about, and that's one that's in the history books for a reason. It's truly gritty stuff, but you are basically a soldier, the audience, and you feel it. You get knots in your stomach. You feel nauseous. It's so intense. And that is just like guerrilla filmmaking. I think Spielberg's even on record as saying they didn't even map it out. There were some happy accidents on the beach, he said, but it all turned out the way it should, as he wanted it to be as realistic of an experience for the audience as it could be. Robbed of Best Picture, by the way, despicable that it didn't win that award. And when it comes down to it, it's a movie that makes you appreciate the sacrifices that veterans make. It's further proof that Spielberg can do it all. He's a master of versatility, tackling various genres throughout his career, from musicals to adventure films to sci-fi to the definitive war movie in Saving Private Ryan. Now we're getting into the top 5. These are the 5 Spielberg movies that I've probably seen the most over the course of my life. These are the 5 that I would take to a deserted island with me. Like, these are my jam, and I adore them. I can quote them. They are my favorite Spielberg films. At number 5, I've got Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. There are days where I even prefer this to Raiders, but I'm gonna say it's still number 5 for me on this list. The introduction of Sean Connery to this franchise as Indy's dad just amplified this film tenfold. It took it to new heights. It's like the ultimate father-son movie, and they have just an unmatched chemistry and relationship on screen, but it's also operating at such a high level from an Indiana Jones movie where the adventures there, the set pieces are there. You get the whole chase sequence in the third act with the tank. The Holy Grail is the artifact they're going after, much like the Lost Ark of the Covenant in the first film. So there are those biblical parallels. The movie brings up these ideas of faith and taking a leap of faith at one point, but it's a globe-trotting adventure with all these different realistic settings. John Williams' score, unreal. It also contains maybe my favorite opening in the entire franchise, with young River Phoenix, R.I.P., portraying Indiana Jones. We get those origin moments, seeing how he got his scar, seeing how he got his hat. Classic, tropes of a franchise, but well-intentioned, and they work. But this movie just further solidifies that if adventure has a name, it must be Indiana Jones. At number 4 on my list, I've got Jurassic Park, ladies and gentlemen. I can only imagine what it was like seeing this movie on the big screen back in 1993, because I imagine audiences were just in awe around the world. What this movie did for visual effects at the time cannot be overstated. It is truly a phenomenal film that brought dinosaurs to life. I mean, Spielberg pulled off the unthinkable, let's just say it. All these years later, all these rewatches later, it still amazes me how this movie moves at such a lightning fast pace, even though you know what's coming. The writing's simply perfect, right? You pair the one man who couldn't be less interested in having children with 2 kids. It just doesn't get better than that. You could make the argument this is John Williams' most iconic score. I wouldn't be mad at that case. It is the definitive dino movie. There is no getting around it. Movies have tried to emulate this and failed over the years. It's a timeless classic for a reason. It's quotable. The score's there. The performances there, especially with Dr. Alan Grant played by Sam Neill. It is a comfort movie to many. It is a definitive 90s blockbuster and one of the most important movies ever.
Dodgson! Everybody, we got Dodgson over here!
At number 3 on my list, I've got E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial from 1982. This movie should have won all the awards. It has stood the test of time because of its pure intentions, its good-heartedness, and its childlike magic. This movie is so nostalgic. I didn't even grow up on it, but when I first saw the film, I was so enamored I had to watch it like the next day, I'm pretty sure. I'm also a huge fan of Stranger Things, which directly pulled inspo from E.T. So like the first season of Stranger Things is just filled with homages to E.T., so my heart is full watching that show. It's a major reason I love it so much. But E.T., guys, the score, I think it's gotta be top 3 John Williams scores, right? I know Jurassic, Indiana Jones, Jaws, all these movies, but E.T.'s in that conversation, right? It has to be. Like when I think of most iconic shots in the history of cinema, Elliot and E.T. flying in front of the moon gotta be top 5. It could be on the Mount Rushmore of just movie moments that everyone knows. By the time the credits roll, this movie just has you feeling like a kid again. You're all giddy inside. It makes me have a longing for my childhood, hanging out in my neighborhood, riding bikes, playing until it was dark outside. Like those were the good old days and we didn't even realize it. This movie's cultural relevance is unmatched. If you surveyed 100 people, more than half of them would probably have it as their number 1 Spielberg film. It's top 3 for a reason. I got one thing to say. E.T. Phone Home. My top 2 are arguably interchangeable, but I have them in a certain order right now. At number 2, I've got Jaws. Not only is this the shark movie that has been copied and ripped off endless times since 1975, but it is the best Spielberg film, arguably. It's a movie that's kind of become a tradition for me to try and rewatch every 4th of July. You know, Christmas and Halloween have their movies. Well, the 4th of July needs one, and damn it, I think it's Jaws. The reason this movie works isn't because the shark is scary and there are these gory kills. It's because we care and are invested in the main 3 characters, Chief Brody, Matt Hooper, and Quint. You pair those 3 up on the Orca boat, they set sail to take down this behemoth of a shark. Adventure ensues. The John Williams score, equal parts terrifying, equal parts adventurous, instantly iconic, but then you get out there on the sea and you hear this Quint backstory, this monologue that just sets the tone. It obviously contains the iconic dolly zoom shot on the beach with Chief Brody, and the behind-the-scenes making of the film is a feat in and of itself, as the shark had technical issues, so they had to hide it a lot more than they wanted to, but that ended up working in the film's favor even more because the fear of the unknown allows the human brain to run wild with imagination and makes scarier deaths and kills than the movie probably could have portrayed. I think it has a perfect script, as you have the small town sheriff who's afraid of water, who has to go out there and take down this shark, facing his greatest fears. So it's a masterclass in just creating natural tension. But each of these 3 characters have their own history with either sharks or the water, so putting them on this boat in the middle of the ocean, going up against this terrifying beast, just makes for one hell of a ride. To me, Jaws is a perfect blend of horror and adventure. It's endlessly quotable and infinitely rewatchable. It'll always have a special place in my heart, and I am forever devastated that I was not able to ride the original Jaws ride at Universal Studios. That still haunts me, honestly. I'll leave you with this before we get to my number 1. Farewell and adieu to you, fair Spanish ladies. You know the rest. At number 1, no surprise for those who followed the channel for any amount of time, is going to be Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is a top tier movie all time for me. It's been in my number 1 slot. It rotates between 3 other films for my outright favorite movie of all time. Yes, the fact that I grew up on Indiana Jones plays a huge part in that, but I think this is the adventure film. The opening 10-15 minutes that culminate with the fertility idol and the boulder sequence are a movie in and of itself. That's like the perfect short film. But you just take Harrison Ford, you put him, maybe the most charismatic, charming man ever in Hollywood, and you make him this archaeologist who goes on this quest. How can you not be enamored? He's the king of cool. I mean, I still remember the first time I watched this movie from when I was a kid like it was yesterday. I was laying on the floor in my living room at my old house, just looking up at the TV the whole entire time, just in awe. Raiders is one of the movies that made me fall in love with movies. Much like the original Star Wars trilogy, this movie inspired so much imagination in my young brain. I would run around my backyard with a toy whip and a revolver and a hat, and I would create these elaborate situations where I'm running through the pine straw in my backyard, I'm kneeling down, and I'm, going through these different booby traps, all to try and get an artifact and return it safely. Movies like Raiders are why we love movies. It's the pinnacle of adventure filmmaking. There's not one slow moment. I think Indy, you could argue, is the most iconic movie character of all time, and I'm kind of beating a dead horse with what I'm about to say, but John Williams' score, unmatched. The main theme for Indy is so recognizable. Same with like Jaws, Jurassic, E.T., etc., but even the silhouette of Indiana Jones, if you cast a shadow on a wall, 90% of people will be like, yeah, that's Indiana Jones. To me, this is a flawless adventure film that fires on all cylinders from the jump. There are very few movies that I could throw on any hour of the day, sit down and watch it for 2 hours without complaining, this is one of them. And while Spielberg's gone on to win Oscars and make, Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, I feel like this is the movie that I'll always remember him for. It's my favorite Indiana Jones film. It's my favorite Steven Spielberg directed film, and forever the one that I will associate with the man. I think he's given us so much over these 35 films, but I have Raiders of the Lost Ark at my personal number one spot. But that concludes my Steven Spielberg ranking as of right now. He's a legend. He's probably my favorite director of all time, and I highly recommend watching through his entire filmography if you haven't. It was a fun journey. If you want to see my in-depth written reviews and ratings, Letterboxd is the place to be. I'll also post this as a list on Letterboxd, but that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for watching. That was a long one. I'm out of breath. So make sure to hit that like button. It helps out tremendously. Comment your ranking of all the Steven Spielberg films down below, including Disclosure Day, and of course, subscribe or hit that notification bell. But thank you guys so much for watching this gauntlet of a video. It was its own little trek in and of itself, its own Indiana Jones adventure, if you will. But that'll do it. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.